Waitress serves wrong coffee to angry customer and receives proposal that shocks everyone at the restaurant. In a bustling New York diner, a simple mix-up between regular and decaf coffee ignites a firestorm that will change lives forever. When a sleep-deprived CEO explodes at a struggling single-mom waitress, neither of them could have predicted the shocking turn of events that would lead to a business proposal beyond anyone's wildest dreams, and unearth secrets that threaten to destroy them both. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon permeated the air of Rosie's Diner, a cozy establishment nestled in the heart of Manhattan. It was 7:30 a.m. on a crisp autumn morning, and the breakfast rush was in full swing. Amidst the cacophony of clattering plates and animated chatter, 28-year-old Sarah Thompson navigated the crowded floor with practiced ease, her ponytail swinging as she balanced trays laden with steaming mugs and hearty plates. Sarah's bright blue eyes betrayed a hint of exhaustion, dark circles barely concealed beneath a hastily applied layer of concealer. She'd been up half the night with her 6-year-old son, Tommy, who was battling a nasty flu. Between her grueling shifts at the diner and caring for Tommy as a single mom, Sarah was running on fumes. As she refilled a customer's mug, Sarah caught a glimpse of her reflection in the polished chrome of the coffee machine. Her uniform was slightly wrinkled, and a few strands of honey blonde hair had escaped her usually neat ponytail. She sighed, tucking the loose strands behind her ear. It wasn't like her to look this disheveled, but she couldn't afford to miss a shift, not with rent due and Tommy's medical bills piling up. The bell above the diner's door chimed, and Sarah's heart sank as she recognized the imposing figure who strode in. Alexander Blackwood, CEO of Blackwood Enterprises, was a regular at Rosie's, and notoriously the most difficult customer they had. Known for his cutthroat business tactics and volatile temper, Blackwood's arrival always put the staff on edge. Table 12, Meg, the head waitress, muttered to Sarah, "Good luck, hon." "He looks even grumpier than usual today." Sarah nodded, plastering on her best smile as she approached Blackwood's table. The man barely looked up from his phone, his fingers flying across the screen as he fired off emails. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood," Sarah greeted cheerfully. "The usual today?" Blackwood grunted in response, not bothering to make eye contact. "Black coffee, 2 eggs over easy, wheat toast, and make it snappy. I've got a board meeting in 30 minutes. "Coming right up, sir," Sarah replied, jotting down the order even though she knew it by heart. As she turned to head towards the kitchen, she couldn't help but overhear snippets of Blackwood's phone conversation. "Listen, Johnson, I don't care how you do it. Just make sure those contracts are signed by noon, or heads will roll. We didn't claw our way to the top by being soft." Sarah shook her head as she put in the order. She couldn't imagine living life with that much stress and anger. Sure, her own life was far from perfect, but at least she could sleep at night knowing she treated people with kindness. Little did Sarah know, as she poured Blackwood's coffee with shaking, tired hands, that this ordinary morning was about to take an extraordinary turn. A simple mistake was about to set in motion a chain of events that would upend both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. As Sarah approached Blackwood's table, balancing his order on her tray, she felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. Lack of sleep and the stress of the morning rush were finally catching up to her. She blinked hard, trying to focus, and set the plate and mug down in front of the scowling CEO. Blackwood immediately grabbed the mug and took a long swig of coffee. His eyes widened, and then narrowed dangerously as he slowly lowered the cup. "What?" he growled, his voice low and menacing. "Is this?" Sarah's stomach dropped. She knew, in that instant, that something had gone terribly wrong, and as Blackwood's face began to redden with rage, she realized that her day was about to get much, much worse. Sarah's heart raced as she stammered, "I am sorry, Mr. Blackwood. Is something wrong with your coffee?" Blackwood's steel-gray eyes bored into her with an intensity that made her want to shrink into the floor. "Wrong?" he hissed, his knuckles white around the mug. "This isn't coffee. This is dishwater. This is an insult to the very concept of caffeine." Sarah's mind reeled. She'd been so tired, so distracted. Had she accidentally served him decaf? Sir, I'm so sorry. I'll get you a fresh cup right away. Do you have any idea? Blackwood cut her off, his voice rising. What kind of day I'm facing? I'm about to go into a meeting that will determine the fate of a multi-billion-dollar merger. And you expect me to function on this travesty. The diner had gone eerily quiet. Every eye was on their table, and Sarah could feel her cheeks burning with humiliation. Please, Mr. Blackwood. I'll fix it immediately. Fix it. Blackwood laughed, a harsh, mirthless sound. You can't fix incompetence, sweetheart. This level of stupidity is clearly baked right into your DNA. Something inside Sarah snapped. Maybe it was the sleepless nights, the constant worry about money, or just the sheer unfairness of it all. But in that moment, Sarah Thompson decided she'd had enough. Now you listen here, Mr. High and Mighty, she said, her voice low but steady. I made a mistake and I apologized, but that doesn't give you the right to treat me like dirt. I'm a human being, not your personal punching bag. Blackwood's eyes widened in shock. Clearly, no one had spoken to him like this in a very long time. How dare you? He began, but Sarah wasn't finished. You know what? I feel sorry for you. You might have all the money in the world, but you don't have an ounce of common decency. I'd rather serve coffee for the rest of my life than become someone like you. The diner was dead silent. Meg stood frozen behind the counter, a pot of fresh coffee forgotten in her hand. Sarah's heart pounded in her ears as the full weight of what she'd done crashed over her. She'd just told off their most important customer. She was going to get fired for sure. To everyone's surprise, Blackwood didn't explode. Instead, a strange expression crossed his face, something between curiosity and... Was that respect? He leaned back in his chair, studying Sarah with new interest. What's your name? He asked, his tone suddenly businesslike. Sarah. Sarah Thompson, she replied, caught off guard by the abrupt change. Blackwood nodded, as if coming to a decision. Well, Sarah Thompson, you've certainly got guts. Tell me something. How would you like to make more money in a week than you do in a year here? Sarah blinked, sure she'd misheard. Excuse me, I have a proposition for you, Blackwood said, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. One that could change your life. Are you interested in hearing it? The entire diner seemed to hold its breath, waiting for Sarah's response. She knew she should say no. This man was clearly unstable, possibly dangerous. But as she thought of Tommy, of the mounting bills and the dreams she'd had to put on hold, Sarah found herself nodding. Yes, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm listening. Blackwood's smile widened, revealing perfect white teeth. Excellent. Meet me at my office this afternoon, 3 p.m. sharp. We have much to discuss. As Blackwood stood to leave, tossing a $100 bill on the table, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just made a deal with the devil. But for the chance to give Tommy a better life, she was willing to take that risk. Little did she know, the real challenges and dangers were only just beginning. The gleaming skyscraper that housed Blackwood Enterprises towered over Sarah as she stood on the sidewalk, clutching her worn purse. She felt woefully out of place in her best outfit, a simple blouse and slacks that paled in comparison to the sharp suits and designer dresses of those bustling in and out of the building. Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself. You can do this, she muttered. For Tommy, the elevator ride to the top floor was a blur. Before she knew it, Sarah was being ushered into an opulent office by a sleek, efficient-looking secretary. Alexander Blackwood stood by floor-to-ceiling windows, hands clasped behind his back as he gazed out at the city below. He turned as Sarah entered, his expression unreadable. Ms. Thompson, right on time. I appreciate punctuality. Sarah nodded, willing her voice to remain steady. Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Blackwood. I admit I'm curious about this proposition of yours. Blackwood gestured to a leather chair. Please sit. He settled behind his massive desk, regarding Sarah with those piercing gray eyes. Tell me, Ms. Thompson, what do you know about corporate espionage? Sarah blinked, caught off guard. Not much, I'm afraid. Just what I've seen in movies. Blackwood's lips quirked in a half-smile. Hollywood does tend to sensationalize things, but the reality is information is power in the business world. And sometimes acquiring that information requires unconventional methods. A knot of unease formed in Sarah's stomach. Mr. Blackwood, if you're suggesting something illegal, he held up a hand. Nothing of the sort. What I'm proposing is perfectly legal, if somewhat ethically ambiguous. Blackwood leaned forward, his gaze intense. I need someone on the inside of Carson Industries. Someone unassuming, someone no one would suspect. Someone like you. Sarah's mind reeled. Carson Industries was Blackwood's biggest competitor. You want me to spy for you? I prefer the term corporate intelligence gatherer, Blackwood said smoothly. Carson's about to launch a new product line that could revolutionize the industry. I need to know what it is. But why me? Sarah asked, bewildered. I'm just a waitress. I don't know anything about your business. Blackwood's eyes glinted. Exactly. You're nobody to them, which makes you perfect. Carson's CEO, Jack Reeves, is a regular at a high-end restaurant downtown. I want you to get a job there as a waitress and get close to him. Sarah's cheeks flushed. Mr. Blackwood, if you're suggesting Nothing so crass, he interrupted. I simply need you to be observant. Listen, report back to me. In exchange, I'll pay you $50,000 per week. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. That kind of money could change everything for her and Tommy. But still, this doesn't feel right, she said softly. Blackwood's expression hardened. Ms. Thompson, let me be clear. This offer is a one-time deal. You either accept now or you walk out that door and go back to barely scraping by. Think of your son. Think of the life you could give him. Sarah closed her eyes, conflicting emotions warring within her. When she opened them, her decision was made. All right, Mr. Blackwood, I'll do it. His smile was triumphant. Excellent. We'll start immediately. My team will create a new identity for you, complete with a background that'll get you hired at the Golden Spoon. As Blackwood outlined the details of her mission, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into a world far more complex and dangerous than she realized. But for Tommy, she'd risk it all. What Sarah didn't know was that Blackwood wasn't telling her everything. His interest in her went far beyond this corporate espionage scheme. He had recognized something in her at the diner, something that had dredged up memories he'd long tried to bury. As Sarah left his office, Blackwood picked up a framed photo on his desk. In it, a much younger version of himself stood next to a woman with striking blue eyes and honey blonde hair. The resemblance to Sarah was uncanny. Soon, he murmured to the photograph. Soon, everything will come full circle. The game was set in motion, and Sarah Thompson was now an unwitting pawn in a plot far more intricate and personal than she could have ever imagined. The next week passed in a whirlwind for Sarah. Blackwood's team worked with terrifying efficiency, crafting a new identity for her, Olivia Parker, a 28-year-old with an impeccable resume in high-end food service. They provided her with a sleek new wardrobe, a crash course in wine knowledge, and enough background information to make her story believable. Sarah, now Olivia, stood outside the Golden Spoon, her heart pounding. The restaurant was the epitome of luxury, its Art Deco facade gleaming in the late afternoon sun. She took a deep breath, smoothing down her designer blazer, and pushed through the heavy brass doors. The maitre d', a distinguished man with salt and pepper hair, looked up as she approached. May I help you? Yes, I have an interview with Mr. Garrett, Sarah said, proud of how steady her voice sounded. Moments later, she was seated across from Derek Garrett, the Golden Spoon's manager. His eyes scanned her resume, eyebrows raised. I must say, Ms. Parker, your experience is impressive. The Ritz in Paris? Le Bernardin? Why leave such prestigious establishments for us? Sarah recited the story she'd rehearsed. I recently moved back to be closer to family. The Golden Spoon's reputation precedes it. I'd be honored to be part of your team. Garrett nodded, seemingly satisfied. Well, your references check out. When can you start? Immediately, Sarah replied, a mix of relief and anxiety flooding through her. As she left the restaurant, now officially employed, Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Well done. Training starts tomorrow. Don't disappoint me. The next morning, Sarah arrived at a nondescript office building. Inside, she found a state-of-the-art surveillance training facility. For the next 3 days, she was drilled in the art of eavesdropping, memory techniques, and how to subtly extract information. On the 4th day, Blackwood himself appeared. Time for your final test, he announced. He led her to a room set up like a high-end bar. A man sat at the counter, nursing a drink. That's one of my employees, Blackwood explained. Your job is to engage him in conversation and find out 3 things: his wife's name, his favorite vacation spot, and the name of his first pet. You have 15 minutes. Sarah's palms were sweaty as she approached the bar. Tough day? She asked sympathetically, grabbing a cloth to wipe down the already spotless counter. The man looked up, offering a weary smile. You could say that. Jim, he introduced himself. Olivia, Sarah replied. Want to talk about it? Sometimes it helps to unload on a stranger. As they chatted, Sarah carefully steered the conversation, using the techniques she'd learned. 15 minutes later, she had all the information Blackwood had requested. Impressive, Blackwood said after dismissing the employee. You're a natural, Miss Thompson. Sarah felt a mix of pride and unease at the compliment. Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. Is there anything else I should know before I start at the Golden Spoon? Blackwood's expression turned serious. Yes, Jack Reeves, Carson's CEO, dines there every Thursday night. He always sits at table 19 and always orders the same thing. Filet mignon, medium rare, with a glass of Chateau Margaux. Your job is to become his regular server. Gain his trust. Listen for any mentions of Project Phoenix. That's the code name for their new product line. Sarah nodded, committing the details to memory. As she turned to leave, Blackwood called out, One more thing, Miss Thompson. Remember, in this game, trust no one. Not even me. The cryptic warning sent a chill down Sarah's spine. As she headed home to prepare for her first shift, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was in way over her head. Meanwhile, across town, Jack Reeves sat in his own office, looking at a dossier. On the cover was a photo of Sarah Thompson. Are you sure about this? He asked the man standing before him. The man nodded grimly. Positive. Blackwood's making his move. The girl is the key to everything. Reeves sighed heavily. Then may God help her, because once this game truly begins, there's no going back. The pieces were set, the players in motion, and Sarah, oblivious to the true stakes, was walking into a decades-old web of secrets, lies, and revenge that would shake the foundations of her world. Sarah's first week at the Golden Spoon was a blur of polished silverware, elaborate wine lists, and the constant pressure to maintain her cover. She threw herself into the role of Olivia Parker, determined to excel and gain access to table 19 Jack Reeves' regular spot. It was on her second Thursday night shift that her opportunity finally came. Sarah overheard the maitre d' mentioning that Reeves' usual server had called in sick. Heart-pounding, she volunteered to take the table. At precisely 8 p.m., Jack Reeves walked in. He was a distinguished man in his early 60s, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Sarah approached his table, plastering on her most charming smile. Good evening, Mr. Reeves. I'm Olivia, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. The usual? Reeves looked up, his gaze appraising. For a heart-stopping moment, Sarah feared he'd see right through her. But then he smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. You're new here, aren't you, Olivia? Sarah nodded. Yes, sir. Just started last week. Well, you've certainly done your homework. Yes, the usual would be perfect. As Sarah turned to put in his order, she felt Reeves' eyes on her back. There was something in his gaze that made her uneasy, as if he knew more than he was letting on. Over the next few weeks, Sarah became Reeves' regular server. She learned his habits, his preferences, and bits and pieces about his personal life. But despite her best efforts, she heard nothing about Project Phoenix. One night, as she refilled Reeves' water glass, she overheard a snippet of conversation with his dinner companion. "The prototype is almost ready. Phoenix will change everything, Jack." Sarah's hand trembled slightly, but she managed to keep her composure. This was the break she'd been waiting for. As she turned to leave, Reeves called out, "Olivia, a moment please." Sarah froze, her heart in her throat. Had she been too obvious? Reeves smiled disarmingly. "I'm having a small gathering at my home next weekend. A charity event. We're a bit short-staffed. I don't suppose you'd be interested in picking up some extra hours." Sarah couldn't believe her luck. "Of course, Mr. Reeves. I'd be happy to help." As she walked away, Sarah missed the knowing look that passed between Reeves and his companion. Later that night, in the safety of her apartment, Sarah called the secure number Blackwood had given her. "Mr. Blackwood? I'm in. Reeves has invited me to work a private event at his home." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Blackwood spoke, his voice was tight with an emotion Sarah couldn't quite place. "Excellent work, Miss Thompson. This is the opportunity we've been waiting for. But be careful. If Reeves suspects anything—" "I understand," Sarah said, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety in her stomach. After hanging up, Sarah checked on Tommy, who was sleeping peacefully. As she brushed a lock of hair from his forehead, she wondered, not for the first time, if she was doing the right thing. Across town, Alexander Blackwood sat in his darkened office, staring at an old photograph. It showed a much younger version of himself with a woman who bore a striking resemblance to Sarah. His fingers traced the woman's face. "Soon, Elizabeth," he whispered. "Soon, everything will be set right." Meanwhile, in his own study, Jack Reeves poured himself a glass of scotch. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "It's me," he said when the other party answered. She took the bait. It's time to move to the next phase. As the city slept, the three players in this dangerous game prepared for their next moves. Sarah, caught in the middle, had no idea that her past, present, and future were about to collide in ways she could never have imagined. The night of Reeves' charity event arrived, and Sarah found herself navigating the opulent halls of his mansion. A tray of champagne flutes balanced expertly in her hand. The house was a masterpiece of modern architecture, all sleek lines and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the twinkling cityscape. As she weaved through the crowd of Silicon Valley elites, Sarah kept her ears open for any mention of Project Phoenix. She'd perfected the art of fading into the background, becoming virtually invisible to the guests as she refilled drinks and cleared empty plates. It was nearing midnight when she overheard a hushed conversation between Reeves and a woman she didn't recognize. They were huddled in a quiet corner, their voices low and urgent. "The biotech implications alone are staggering, Jack," the woman was saying. "If Phoenix works as intended, it could revolutionize everything from medicine to agriculture." Sarah's pulse quickened. This was it, the information Blackwood had sent her to find. Reeves nodded, his expression grave. "That's precisely why we need to be careful, Margaret. In the wrong hands, Phoenix could be catastrophic. We need to—" He broke off suddenly, his eyes locking onto Sarah. She drifted a bit too close in her eagerness to hear more. "Olivia," Reeves said, his tone deceptively light, "I believe we're running low on the Bollinger. Would you mind fetching another case from the cellar?" Sarah nodded, cursing herself for the slip-up. "Of course, Mr. Reeves." As she made her way to the wine cellar, Sarah's mind raced. Biotech? Medicine? What exactly was Project Phoenix? And why did Reeves seem so concerned about it falling into the wrong hands? The cellar was cool and dimly lit. As Sarah located the champagne, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to find Jack Reeves standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You know, Olivia," he said softly, "you remind me so much of someone I used to know. Someone very dear to me." Sarah's heart pounded. "Oh? Who might that be, sir?" Reeves took a step closer. "A brilliant woman named Elizabeth. Elizabeth Thompson. Any relation? The bottle of champagne nearly slipped from Sarah's grasp. Elizabeth Thompson, her mother's name. But how could Reeves possibly know that? I'm not sure, Mr. Reeves, she stammered. Thompson is a common name, after all. Reeves nodded slowly, his piercing blue eyes never leaving her face. Indeed it is. Tell me, Olivia, or should I say, Sarah? Does Alexander Blackwood know who you really are? The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. I don't know what you mean. Reeves' expression softened. Oh, my dear, you're just a pawn in a game you don't even understand. But don't worry, I'm here to help you. Before Sarah could respond, a commotion erupted upstairs. Shouts and the sound of breaking glass filtered down to the cellar. Reeves cursed under his breath. They're here. We need to go. Now. Who's here? Sarah asked, panic rising in her throat. What's going on? But Reeves was already moving, grabbing her arm and pulling her towards a hidden door at the back of the cellar. There's no time to explain. We need to get you out of here before Blackwood's men find you. As Reeves led her through a secret passage, Sarah's mind whirled with questions. How did he know her real name? What did he mean about Blackwood? And most importantly, who was Elizabeth Thompson? And what did she have to do with all of this? As they emerged into the cool night air through a concealed exit, Sarah heard the unmistakable sound of gunshots from inside the house. Reeves pulled her towards a waiting car. Get in, he ordered. I promise I'll explain everything, but right now we need to disappear. With one last look at the chaos erupting behind them, Sarah made a split-second decision. She got into the car. As they sped away into the night, Sarah realized that her life as she knew it was over. She was now fully immersed in a world of secrets, lies, and danger, and the only way out was through. Little did she know, the real revelations and the true test of her strength were yet to come. The car sped through the night, leaving the chaos of Reeves' mansion far behind. Sarah's mind was reeling, her thoughts a jumbled mess of questions and fears. She glanced at Reeves, who was focused intently on the road, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Mr. Reeves, she began, her voice trembling slightly. I think it's time you told me what's really going on here. Reeves sighed heavily, his eyes never leaving the road. You're right, Sarah. You deserve the truth. But I warn you, it's a long and complicated story. One that started long before you were born. He paused, collecting his thoughts. Your mother, Elizabeth Thompson, was one of the most brilliant minds of her generation. She, Alexander Blackwood, and I were all part of a cutting-edge research team at MIT, working on what would eventually become Project Phoenix. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. My mother? But she was just a high school science teacher. Reeves shook his head sadly. That was her cover, Sarah. In reality, Elizabeth was pioneering research that could have changed the world. Project Phoenix is a revolutionary biotech initiative. Imagine being able to regenerate any part of the human body, cure any disease, even extend human life indefinitely. But something went wrong, Sarah guessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Reeves nodded grimly. Elizabeth discovered that Blackwood wanted to weaponize the technology. She threatened to expose him to shut down the project. And then what? Sarah pressed, though part of her dreaded the answer. She disappeared, Reeves said softly. Along with all her research, Blackwood was furious. He's been searching for her, and her work, ever since. Sarah's mind was spinning. But what does this have to do with me? Why did Blackwood hire me to spy on you? Reeves pulled the car over to the side of the road and turned to face her. Because, Sarah, you're the key to everything. Your mother hid her research before she vanished. And we believe she left clues that only you can decipher. Sarah shook her head in disbelief. That's impossible. I don't know anything about biotech or secret research. Not consciously, no, Reeves agreed. But Elizabeth was clever. We think she found a way to encode the information into your very DNA. Blackwood's been watching you for years, waiting for the right moment to make his move. A chill ran down Sarah's spine as the pieces started to fall into place. The job offer, it was never about corporate espionage, was it? Reeves shook his head. No, Blackwood needed you clothes, needed to run tests. He's been trying to extract the information from you without you realizing it. Suddenly, Sarah remembered something. The medical examinations they made me go through before starting the job. Oh God, what did they do to me? Reeves reached out, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Nothing permanent, I assure you, but we need to make sure it stays that way. If Blackwood gets his hands on you now, there's no telling what lengths he'll go to. Sarah's mind was reeling. Her entire world had been turned upside down in the span of a few hours. But one thought cut through the chaos, sharp and terrifying. Tommy, she gasped. My son. If what you're saying is true, he's in danger too. Reeves nodded gravely. You're right. We need to get him to safety immediately. As they pulled back onto the road, this time heading towards Sarah's apartment, she felt a steely resolve settle over her. Whatever secrets her mother had hidden, whatever dangers lay ahead, she would face them. For Tommy, for the mother she barely remembered, and for the truth she now desperately needed to uncover. But as they raced through the night, neither Sarah nor Reeves noticed the sleek black car that pulled out from a side street, following at a discreet distance. The game was far from over, and the most dangerous player had yet to make his move. Sarah's heart pounded as Reeves' car screeched to a halt outside her apartment building. The quiet suburban street seemed eerily calm compared to the turmoil in her mind. Stay here, Reeves ordered, his voice tense. I'll go get Tommy. No, Sarah said firmly, already opening her door. He's my son. I'm coming with you. They rushed into the building, taking the stairs two at a time. Sarah's elderly neighbor, Mrs. Gonzalez, was supposed to be watching Tommy. As they reached her floor, Sarah's blood ran cold. The door to Mrs. Gonzalez's apartment was ajar. Sarah burst in, Reeves close behind. Tommy? Mrs. Gonzalez. The apartment was a mess, furniture overturned, pictures knocked off the walls. And there, huddled in the corner, was Mrs. Gonzalez, her eyes wide with fear. Sarah, she cried. They took him. These men in suits, they said they were Tommy's uncles. But I knew something was wrong. I tried to stop them. But when? Sarah demanded, her voice cracking. How long ago? Maybe 10 minutes, Mrs. Gonzalez sobbed. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I should have. But Sarah was already racing out the door, Reeves hot on her heels. As they burst out of the building, a sleek black SUV peeled away from the curb, tires squealing. No! Sarah screamed, starting to run after it. Reeves grabbed her arm, pulling her back towards his car. We'll never catch them on foot. Come on. They jumped into Reeves' car and took off in pursuit. Sarah's mind was a whirlwind of fear and rage. How did they find us so quickly? Reeves' expression was grim as he weaved through traffic. Blackwood's resources are vast. He probably had people watching your apartment this whole time. As they chased the SUV through the city streets, Sarah's phone buzzed. An unknown number. With shaking hands, she answered. Hello, Sarah, came Blackwood's smooth voice. I believe I have something that belongs to you. If you hurt him, I swear to God. Now, Blackwood interrupted. Let's not resort to threats. Tommy is perfectly safe. For now. Whether he stays that way is entirely up to you. Sarah's grip tightened on the phone. What do you want? It's simple, really. You have something I need. Information your mother hid away years ago. Bring me that information and you can have your son back. You have 24 hours. The line went dead. Sarah turned to Reeves, her eyes wild with desperation. We have to give him what he wants. Reeves shook his head, his eyes never leaving the road as he continued to pursue the SUV. We can't, Sarah. If Blackwood gets his hands on that research, millions of lives could be at stake. We need to find another way. He's my son, Sarah shouted, tears streaming down her face. I know, Reeves said softly, and I promise you we'll get him back. But we need to be smart about this. Suddenly, the SUV ahead of them made a sharp turn, heading towards the industrial district. Reeves followed, his face set in determination. "I think I know where they're going," he said. "There's an old Blackwood Enterprises warehouse down here. It would be the perfect place to hold Tommy." As they approached the warehouse, Reeves pulled over, killing the lights. "We need a plan," he said. "We can't just rush in there." Sarah took a deep breath, forcing herself to think. Her mother had trusted her with vital information she didn't even know she had, and now her son's life hung in the balance. "Okay," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "You said my mother hid clues in my DNA. Is there any way we can access that information quickly?" Reeves' eyes lit up. "Maybe. I have an old colleague, a brilliant geneticist. If anyone can unlock the secrets in your DNA, it's her. But it's risky, Sarah. We'd be racing against the clock, and there's no guarantee it would work." Sarah looked at the warehouse, imagining Tommy scared and alone inside. Then she thought of her mother, of the sacrifice she must have made to protect this information. She made her decision. "Let's do it," she said. "But first, we need to make sure Tommy is actually in there." As they crept towards the warehouse, Sarah's mind raced. Whatever secrets lay hidden in her genes, whatever dangers they were about to face, one thing was clear. The next 24 hours would change everything. And Sarah was determined to see her son again, no matter the cost. Little did they know, Blackwood was already several steps ahead, and the true nature of Project Phoenix was far more terrifying than they could have imagined. Sarah and Reeves crouched behind a stack of rusted shipping containers, observing the warehouse. 2 armed guards patrolled the perimeter, their faces impassive in the dim light. "There," Reeves whispered, pointing to a second-floor window. A faint silhouette moved across it, small, child-sized. Sarah's heart leapt. "Tommy," she breathed. Reeves placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "We can't rush in. We need that information first. It's our only leverage." Reluctantly, Sarah nodded. They retreated to Reeves' car and sped towards the city, heading for the lab of Dr. Amelia Chun, Reeves' former colleague. As they drove, Sarah's mind wandered to her mother. She had only vague memories of Elizabeth Thompson, a warm smile, the smell of lavender, a soothing voice singing lullabies. How could that gentle presence have been a brilliant scientist embroiled in such danger? They arrived at a nondescript building on the outskirts of town. Dr. Chun, a petite woman with sharp eyes behind thick glasses, ushered them into her lab. "Jack filled me in," she said briskly. "We don't have much time. Sarah, I need a blood sample." As Dr. Chun worked, Sarah paced anxiously. Reeves watched her, his expression troubled. "There's something you should know," he said softly. "About your mother." Sarah stopped, turning to face him. "What is it?" Reeves sighed heavily. "Elizabeth. She didn't just disappear. The night she threatened to expose Blackwood, there was a fire in her lab. We all thought she'd died." Sarah felt as if the floor had dropped out from beneath her. "But you're saying she didn't?" "I'm not sure," Reeves admitted. "But about a year after the fire, I received a package. Inside was a locket, Elizabeth's locket, and a note. It just said, 'Protect her.' I think she was referring to you." Sarah's hand went to her throat, where that very locket now hung. She'd always assumed it had been a gift from her father. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "I couldn't be sure it was really from her," Reeves said. "And I didn't want to give you false hope. But more importantly, I needed to keep you safe. If Blackwood had any inkling that Elizabeth might be alive, or that you might hold the key to her research." He trailed off, but Sarah understood. Her entire life had been shaped by secrets she'd never known existed. "I've got something," Dr. Chun called out suddenly. They rushed to her computer, where complex strings of code scrolled across the screen. "It's brilliant," Dr. Chun murmured. Elizabeth encoded the information into junk DNA sequences. To anyone else, it would look like meaningless genetic noise. But with the right key, "Can you decode it?" Sarah asked urgently. Dr. Chun nodded. "It'll take time, but yes. The question is, what do we do with the information once we have it?" Reeves' expression was grim. "We need to destroy it. Project Phoenix is too dangerous to ever see the light of day." "No," Sarah said firmly. Both Reeves and Dr. Chun looked at her in surprise. "My mother gave her life to protect this research. There has to be a reason. We need to understand what it is before we make any decisions." Reeves opened his mouth to argue, but was cut off by the sound of shattering glass. Armed figures in black tactical gear poured into the lab. "Run!" Reeves shouted, overturning a table for cover. In the chaos that followed, Sarah grabbed a USB drive from Dr. Chen's computer and ran. Shots rang out behind her as she burst through a back door into an alley. She ran blindly, her lungs burning, the USB drive clutched tightly in her hand. As she turned a corner, she collided hard with someone. Looking up, she found herself face to face with Alexander Blackwood. "Hello, Sarah," he said, his voice eerily calm. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Before she could react, she felt a sharp prick in her neck. As the world began to fade to black, her last thought was of Tommy, and of the mother she'd never truly known. The truth, it seemed, was finally within reach. But at what cost? Sarah awoke to the steady beep of medical equipment. As her vision cleared, she found herself in a sterile, white room that looked like a cross between a hospital and a high-tech laboratory. She tried to move, only to discover she was strapped to a bed. "Ah, you're awake," came a familiar voice. Alexander Blackwood stepped into view, his steel-gray eyes studying her with a mix of curiosity and something that looked almost like regret. "Where's Tommy?" Sarah demanded, her voice hoarse. Blackwood's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "Safe, for now. But let's talk about you, Sarah. Or should I say, the key to Elizabeth's legacy." He moved to a nearby console, tapping a few keys. A holographic display sprang to life, showing complex molecular structures rotating slowly in the air. "Your mother's work was truly revolutionary," Blackwood continued. "Project Phoenix isn't just about regeneration or extending life. It's about redefining what it means to be human." Sarah struggled against her restraints. "I don't care about your project. I want my son." Blackwood turned to her, his expression suddenly fierce. "You should care. This is your birthright, Sarah. Elizabeth's greatest achievement. With this, we could cure every disease, end aging, even bring back the dead." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. "Bring back the dead? That's not possible, isn't it?" Blackwood challenged. "Your DNA holds the key to cellular regeneration on a scale never before imagined. We're on the brink of playing God." Sarah's mind reeled. Was this why her mother had gone to such lengths to hide her research? Not because it was dangerous, but because it was too powerful? "You're insane," she whispered. Blackwood's eyes flashed. "Am I? Or am I the only one who truly understands the potential here? Your mother was weak. She couldn't see the bigger picture. My mother was trying to protect the world from people like you," Sarah shot back. For a moment, Blackwood's composure cracked. "You don't know anything about Elizabeth, about what we had, what we lost." Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility. Blackwood's head snapped towards a security monitor. "Impossible," he muttered. On the screen, Sarah saw chaos erupting in the corridors outside. And there, in the midst of it all, was Jack Reeves, leading what looked like a tactical team. Blackwood cursed, turning back to Sarah. "Seems our time is cut short. But don't worry, my dear. This is far from over." He reached for a syringe on a nearby tray. Sarah struggled harder against her restraints, but it was useless. As Blackwood approached with the needle, the door to the lab burst open. "Step away from her, Alexander," Reeves commanded, his gun trained on Blackwood. Blackwood's face contorted with rage. "You fool! You have no idea what you're interfering with." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Blackwood lunged for a nearby console. Reeves fired. The bullet hit Blackwood in the shoulder, spinning him around. As he fell, his hand slammed down on a large red button. Instantly, klaxons began to wail. A computerized voice announced, Emergency protocols initiated. Facility self-destruct sequence activated. All personnel evacuate immediately. No! Blackwood screamed, clutching his bleeding shoulder. The research. Reeves rushed to Sarah, quickly freeing her from the restraints. We need to go. Now! As they ran from the room, Sarah caught a glimpse of Blackwood scrambling towards a computer terminal, his face a mask of desperation. The facility was in chaos. They raced through smoke-filled corridors, dodging panicked scientists and security personnel. Tommy! Sarah yelled over the din. We have to find Tommy. Reeves nodded grimly. This way. They burst into a room where several children were being held. Sarah's heart leapt as she spotted Tommy, scared but unharmed. Mom! He cried, running into her arms. As they made their way towards the exit, the building shaking around them, Sarah's mind was a whirlwind. The true nature of Project Phoenix, Blackwood's obsession, her mother's sacrifice. It was all too much to process. They emerged into the cool night air just as a series of explosions rocked the facility behind them. Sarah held Tommy close, watching as years of research and secrets went up in flames. But even as relief washed over her, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. Somewhere in the burning rubble, the secrets of Project Phoenix still lurked, and Alexander Blackwood was still out there, driven by an obsession that threatened to reshape the very fabric of life itself. As sirens wailed in the distance, Sarah looked down at the locket around her neck, her mother's locket. Inside, she knew, lay the final piece of the puzzle, a choice that only she could make. The dawn was breaking, but for Sarah Thompson, the darkest chapter of her journey was just beginning. In the days following the destruction of Blackwood's facility, Sarah's world became a whirlwind of debriefings, security measures, and agonizing decisions. She and Tommy were placed under protective custody, their lives forever changed by the events that had unfolded. 1 week after their narrow escape, Sarah sat across from Jack Reeves in a secure safe house, Tommy asleep in the next room. Between them on the table lay her mother's locket. Are you sure about this? Reeves asked, his voice heavy with concern. Sarah nodded, her fingers tracing the delicate engravings on the locket. It's time we knew the truth, all of it. With trembling hands, she opened the locket. Inside was not a photo, but a tiny data chip. Reeves carefully extracted it and inserted it into a secure tablet. The screen flickered to life, revealing the face of Elizabeth Thompson, Sarah's mother. She looked tired, her once vibrant eyes shadowed with worry, but there was a determination in her gaze that Sarah recognized all too well. If you're watching this, Elizabeth began, then I'm gone, and you, my darling Sarah, have become the guardian of a terrible and wonderful secret. Over the next hour, Elizabeth laid bare the full scope of Project Phoenix. It wasn't just about regeneration or extending life. It was about transcending the very limits of human existence. The ability to rewrite genetic code on the fly, to cure any disease, to potentially transfer consciousness itself. But with such power comes unimaginable danger, Elizabeth warned. In the wrong hands, Phoenix could be used to create unstoppable biological weapons, to establish a new class of superior humans, to upend the very fabric of society. Sarah listened, tears streaming down her face, as her mother explained her decision to hide the research, to encode it within her own daughter's DNA. I'm so sorry for the burden I've placed on you, my love, Elizabeth said, her voice breaking. But I know you'll make the right choice, whether to destroy this knowledge forever, or to find a way to use it for the good of all humanity. That decision is yours now. As the recording ended, Sarah sat in stunned silence. Reeves reached out, gently squeezing her hand. What will you do? He asked softly. Sarah took a deep breath, her mind racing with the implications of her mother's legacy. She thought of Blackwood, of his obsession and the lengths he'd gone to. She thought of the potential for both miraculous healing and unthinkable destruction. Finally, she spoke. We can't destroy it. This knowledge, it's too important. But we can't let it fall into the wrong hands either. Reeves nodded slowly. What do you propose? We build a team, Sarah said. a plan forming in her mind. The best minds, the most trustworthy people we can find. We continue my mother's work, but we do it right, transparent, ethical, for the good of everyone, not just the privileged few. It won't be easy, Reeves warned. Blackwood is still out there, and there will be others who would kill for this knowledge. Sarah's expression hardened with resolve. I know, but this is my mother's legacy, and now it's mine. We'll find a way. As dawn broke outside, Sarah and Reeves began to outline their plans for the future. A future where the promise of Project Phoenix might be realized without sacrificing the very humanity it sought to elevate. In the other room, Tommy stirred in his sleep, unaware of the monumental decisions being made just feet away. Sarah's heart swelled with love for her son, and with determination to create a better world for him. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and ethical minefields. But as Sarah fingered the locket around her neck, she felt a sense of purpose she'd never known before. Her mother's final gift wasn't just scientific knowledge. It was the chance to shape the future itself. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Sarah Thompson was ready to face them. For her son, for her mother's memory, and for the betterment of all humankind. Thank you for listening until the end. Share your opinion about the story in the comments and let us know which character you liked the most. If this story touched you and you want to hear more, click on the next story appearing on your screen. Leave a like and subscribe to our channel so we can build a great community of people who share emotional stories together. Until the next story.